Hey guys, who here likes puzzle games? Because I sure don't. Okay, well, I guess that's kind of a lie, because simple, more traditional puzzle games are usually pretty fun to waste time on. You know, your Bejeweled and Zuma Deluxes of the world. No, when I say I don't really like puzzle games, I'm more referring to stuff like, well, most Mascot horror games released in like the last 8 years. Ignoring classic FNAF and a few other outliers, a majority of the games in the Mascot horror space fall into the exact same star-shaped hole on that one baby block toy. You walk around, maybe do a little bit of combat, get scared, sometimes that might as well be a fucking optional thing in the genre at this point, and finally, you do puzzles. I 100% understand why so many Mascot horror games do this. Don't get me wrong, puzzles are definitely fun for some people, and they do a good job of stretching out the runtime of a game without requiring that much effort. This is obviously advantageous for developers who are already probably working on shoestring, non-existing budgets. At least to start off anyway. But yeah, there are so many puzzles in a lot of these games that I genuinely think it would be fair to call some of them puzzle games. Something like Zoonomaly especially deserves that title, given that it is literally just a puzzle game with a Mascot horror coat of paint slapped on it. Even all the way back like 2 years ago when I made my video on Poppy Playtime, I straight up called Chapter 1 a puzzle game first, horror game second. Now, none of this is actually bad or anything, especially if you like puzzle games like this. Hell, I know people who love doing puzzles in Mascot horror games, but it's really not for me. Not only is it a little tiring to see the same style of gameplay in all of these games, I'm also just not really a fan of puzzle games like this, which I'm sure you've already deciphered 15 times over at this point. I mean, it was literally the first thing I said in this video. Are you even paying attention?
Yeah! Can you stop rambling like a dumbass for 1 second and explain what this has to do with the current video? Pretty please, oh pretty please.
Yeah, you're right. I should probably get to the point of this video already. Wait, hold on, why are you fucking yellow? What happened to the blue one? And they're already gone. Okay, cool man, whatever. All that aside, the reason I started this video off with a whole rant about puzzles in children's games is because the game we're gonna be talking about today pretty much has no puzzles, which is kind of rare in the Mascot horror genre if you couldn't tell. Sure, there are puzzle adjacent aspects of the game, but the majority of the gameplay is heavily focused on parkour, platforming, and movement. And if it wasn't already obvious at this point, that style of gameplay is way more up my alley. The game in question? Finding Frankie, a brand new Mascot horror game that takes place in an evil fucked up parkour game show. If that name sounds familiar, especially coming out of my mouth, you may have seen my video covering the trailer for the game over on my very alive, very active, very up-to-date second channel. I've been following this game almost since it was announced, and the concept alone had me sold right off the bat. I mean, a first-person 3D platformer with Mascot horror elements feels like it was literally made for me. Not only that though, the game wasn't going to be chapter-based or anything, just a standalone game with a start and a finish. The only other game in the Mascot horror genre I can think of off the top of my head that did anything similar to that, besides FNAF, is My Friendly Neighborhood, so it's always cool to see it happen. I mean, I guess the Bandman games also fall into this camp, since they're technically standalone experiences and not chapters, but fuck you, we're not counting that. No, we're not counting that. And by the way, guys, I don't know if you know, but the bird up meme is still massive, by the way. Yeah, no, massive. Also, you should subscribe to the YouTube channel right now. Anyway, back to Finding Nemo Mascot Horror Edition. I was given an early copy of this game shortly before it came out and was able to beat it before the release date. So huge thanks to the dev team for hooking me up. However, this isn't a sponsorship or anything. I'm going to give my 100% genuine opinion on this game, including aspects that don't actually affect me, such as the price of the game. Sure, I got Finding Frankie for free, but do the content of the game warrant that price tag? We'll touch on it later, but I think my overall thoughts on the game are a little more important right now. Here's my take on Finding Frankie. I think this game is personally the closest thing I've played to a perfect Mascot horror game, at least for my tastes. This is obviously a very subjective topic, and I expect opinions on this game to kind of be all over the place, especially as it ages. But I'm pretty firm on my belief that Finding Frankie is almost perfect. However, I am stressing that almost pretty hard here, because there are a ton of small things in Finding Frankie that absolutely negatively bring down the experience. This is the team's first game. I think it would be a genuine miracle if they hit a flawless home run on their first attempt. It's damn close, don't get it twisted. and Finding Frankie is especially impressive given all that context. But I feel like some healthy criticism towards the game could do a lot for future releases, assuming we get a sequel or something. I do absolutely love this game though, and I'm excited to talk about it. So let's do that. Strap in, folks, as I take you through the almost perfect Mascot horror game and what it got wrong. This is Finding Frankie. But first, this video is sponsored by Raycon. You guys must be buying a lot of earbuds or something, because we're back with another Raycon Everyday Earbuds partnership. I already told you all about their amazing, no fuss, best-selling everyday earbuds, but believe it or not, there are even more features I can go over. They are just that feature-rich. For example, I never went over how great the battery life is on these things. Other brands of wireless earbuds for a similar or maybe even higher price often have some pretty weak battery lives, which is always extremely annoying. With Raycon's everyday earbuds, I can listen to my favorite girly pop music for up to 32 hours straight, meaning I can go my entire day using them and never have to worry about the battery dying. If you, for whatever reason, need even more convincing, Raycon's Black Friday deals are live now. Not only can you get these amazing earbuds for an even better price than before, they also make great gifts for your friends and family. I've also been loving these cool protective case covers. First of all, check out this design. It complements the earbud's color perfectly, and it's so stylish. And not only do these look great, they support wireless charging, so I don't even have to take them out of the protective cover to get 90 minutes of battery in just 10 minutes of charging time. With a 30-day happiness guarantee, you really have nothing to lose trying out Raycon. It's time to save big for Black Friday. Go to buyraycon.com/yeah today to get up to 30% off site-wide. That's right, you'll get up to 30% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/yeah. Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Alright, so normally in my videos, I like to go over everything in the order it appears in the game I'm covering, essentially just walking you through the narrative while bringing up relevant gameplay points along the way. We're not doing that today. We're gonna try something a little different instead. Since this game is so short, only taking a little over an hour to complete on a first playthrough, I thought it would be a little more productive to instead talk about each of the gameplay segment types grouped together. Like, there are a bunch of parkour sections in Finding Frankie, but instead of bringing up each one as it shows up in the game's linear story, I'm instead going to generally talk about all of them together. So I'm kinda gonna be jumping all over the place on this one. But don't worry, I'll go over the basic story first, just so everyone at home who knows nothing about Finding Frankie will still be able to follow along with no issues. Alright. With that out of the way, it's time to become storyteller again and tell you the tale of Finding Frankie. A story that makes little to no sense, to be honest, but it's okay because it's funny. I'm sorry if I explained this poorly. Let's do this. You play as a child, probably. I don't think it's ever explicitly said you're a child in the game, but there are enough context clues to just assume you probably play as a child here. That makes a lot of the game significantly more fucked up as well, as we'll see in like 2 seconds here, but I mean, that's kind of just standard practice for the genre. A Mascot horror game with dead kids? Oh, the horror! This has never, ever been done before, not even a single time. You end up becoming the lucky winner of an elusive VHS tape placed in a box of Frankie's Fruit Flakes. Said VHS tape is essentially the equivalent to a Willy Wonka golden ticket for this universe, except instead of going to a really cool candy factory where you might die, you instead go to Frankie's Parkour Palace, a giant, nonsensical game show set where the whole might die thing gets thrown out the window and you just die. You just fucking die. It's pretty heavily hinted at much later in Finding Frankie that nobody has ever won the game show before, which means 100% of people who enter Frankie's Parkour Palace just die. Why people keep coming here is beyond me, especially considering this is a live televised program, but I guess the promise of a $5 million cash prize is worth losing your life over. Personally, I would disagree with that claim, but 99% of gamblers do quit before they hit big. So I guess our protagonist is down to test their luck for that sweet, sweet cash. After the introduction cutscene is over, we find ourselves in a dark room with a closed door in front of us and a singular wall-mounted TV. After a few seconds, the TV springs to life with some cute animations, pretty much explaining what the intro already hinted at before. 4 lucky winners of the VHS tapes are in this very building, and they must complete Frankie's Parkour Palace in order to win the $5 million cash prize. Pretty simple shit. With the explanation over and done with, the door opens up, and we're given access to another small room. The main thing of note here is this is where we put on our Frankie costume, which is a mandatory aspect of participating in the game show. AKA the devs didn't want to model human faces for the player character or other humans in the game, and just came up with this, which is a really fun workaround, to be fair. I think it really unifies us with the other contestants. Like, it doesn't matter who's under the mask. We're all here for the same reason. Big fucking money. And at the same time, the company doesn't really care who we are either. Everyone's wearing that same mask, and we're all here to give them the same thing. Speaking of the other contestants, after we put on our costume, we're allowed into the next room, which has the starting line that all the contestants must wait at before the race begins. Tensions are high, it's truly anybody's game, or nobody's game given the non-existent track record of winners, but ignore that. Here we go. Okay. Oh, that's gore of my comfort contestants. Okay, so Frankie, who is now revealed to be a big scary-ass monster, immediately bursts into the room as soon as the starting line countdown ends. And to nobody's surprise, he immediately kills the other 3 contestants. However, we are thankfully able to escape while he's distracted and are able to continue forward in the parkour course. At this point in the game, the actual story kind of takes a backseat in favor of the gameplay. Since Finding Frankie has slightly more in-depth mechanics than most other Mascot horror games, the game takes its time to teach the player everything and get them used to the controls, which is very appreciated. Here are the small story points that I feel are worth mentioning from this part of the game. There's an announcer on the intercom system that talks to you and guides you around the set. The identity of this announcer is kept intentionally secret, but they are clearly important to some degree. As you make your way through the various sections of the parkour course, the announcer will slowly guide you in the direction of Henry Hotline, another Mascot character featured on this TV show production. There's countless character cutouts and posters of him scattered around the building, so you get a good idea of what he looks like before you actually find him. He's pretty much just a Tumblr sexy man toy phone. Truly peak character design. On this journey to find Henry, you end up in a small storage room with no way out other than a single breaker box on one of the walls. Clicking this breaker box triggers a chase with Monster Frankie, which is really cool, and we'll talk about it later. Finishing the chase and hitting a few more buttons leads us to Deputy Duck's police station, home of the final Mascot character in Frankie's Parkour Palace. Deputy Duck isn't your typical horror monster though. In fact, he's not even a monster at all. He's actually just a scanner device that happens to have a sentient toy duck head on the top of it. For some fucking reason, I don't know why. Upon entering his office, there's an empty jail cell and tons of wanted posters for none other than Henry Hotline himself. This is very obviously because of the countless war crimes that Henry Hotline has committed in his many years of being active, such as looking so dang cute, damn! Anyway, Deputy Duck immediately tries to murder us when we pick him up, but a quick throw to the wall lets him know the real Alpha Wolf is here, and he immediately just becomes cool with us. Remember kids, if you're not getting your way with a stranger, just throw them against a wall and they'll immediately be chill with you. This is not a legally binding piece of advice, and if anybody asks you where you heard this from, say Henry Hotline told you, not me! Now that we have Henry Hotline's biggest op on our side, it's time we finally pay him a visit. Moving forward through some epic Mascot horror events eventually leads us to the area where Henry hangs out. But all we have access to at first is this small closed off area. With no other options, we ring the toy phone in the room, which makes Henry finally show himself. He cries and whines for like 2 seconds about being tired of the constant ringings of the phone in his area before backing off into the darkness. Maybe try not being a phone if that's the issue. Oh, and he's no longer a Tumblr sexy man, at least in the conventional sense. I feel like this is probably important to point out. He's like a monster now. From here, with the help of Deputy Duck, we deal with Henry Hotline in both this section and in a short chase sequence immediately after. This then leads into a Fall Guys death trap, which then leads into what is essentially a short-lived hub world for the ending of the game, the Utilidors. This is a series of hallways underneath the main Parkour Palace that leads to a bunch of other places that are required to beat the game. You can kind of do a bunch of these story beats in different orders, depending on what direction you go in or what choices you make. So I'm just gonna quickly run through all the relevant story stuff that happens down here. Okay. The main thing to talk about here is the reveal of the real Frankie. You see, that evil, fucked up tweaker version of Frankie we've been dealing with on and off the entire game is actually not the Frankie. I have no idea what he's actually supposed to be in the context of the universe, other than a glorified death trap for the game show. No, the real Frankie is actually that announcer voice we've been hearing the whole game, which is revealed in a cutscene you can access once you pass the TV control room down in the utilidors. The real Frankie isn't like a human or something. He's literally just another Frankie, except he looks happy and joyous instead of evil and fucked up. I don't know when else I'm gonna get a chance to mention this, so I just want to quickly say that the animation here is genuinely fantastic. When it comes to the overall production of Finding Frankie, aspects like this knock it out of the park. Anyway, now that we've found Frankie, he explains to us who he is, barely, before getting interrupted by a police report that mentions the death of 3 other contestants from the start of the game. Frankie then awkwardly turns off the broadcast and tells us where to go next. Okay, so we need to talk about how this police report literally makes 0 sense in the context of the world the game sets up. As it's explained to us later, and as I already explained a little earlier, it is heavily implied that nobody has ever won this game show in its history of being on air. Considering that losing this game show results in death, and there are literally dead bodies all over the building that can be seen by everyone watching at home, you'd think the police would have, I don't know, gotten on this case way sooner. They seem surprised that 3 people died when there have been probably over 100 deaths documented on fucking live TV. I have 2 theories to make this make any sense. First one, the police in this universe genuinely do not care. They call out the deaths to investigate, but never actually go and report them. An alternative take on this specific theory is that Frankie has blackmail or some kind of deal with the cops, so they never show up at the Parkour Palace set. Kinda like an illegal gambling room in the back of a laundromat that pays off the cops to turn a blind eye. Except instead of gambling, it's mass-scale live-streamed murder for entertainment. You know, pretty comparable. Chat, which one is worse? Sound off in the comments below. Also, yes, I did just steal that gambling room example from young Sheldon. Yes, I do indeed have high-class taste in media. Thank you very much. In Frankie's little explanation from 2 seconds ago, he mentioned that there's one final set of elevators to use located straight ahead. These elevators lead to a water park and a trampoline park respectively. Each of these areas has one key to collect that is then used to unlock a big-ass door leading to the final section of the game. Unfortunately, both of these elevators are currently missing their power source, so we need to go even deeper down into the sewers to turn on the elevator power supplies. One quick swim and a very odd encounter with both Monster Frankie and actual Frankie later, the elevators are back up and running, and both keys can now be collected. Literally nothing important happens in these sections when it comes to the plot, they are purely just for gameplay, so we're gonna fast forward to after both keys have been collected. Back up at the utilidors, we can now make our way over to the big locked door, which is the entrance to Frankie's Frosted Peak. Before we get to that though, there's one final story section that can kind of be done at any point while you're in the utilidors. It can also be entirely skipped, I'm pretty sure too. I'm pretty sure that was part of the speedrun, so yeah, it's a little weird. I wasn't sure how to bring it up, so I just threw it at the end here. Basically, you run into Henry Hotline one final time, he yaps a little bit about the dark underbelly of the parkour park, which like, yeah, I could have guessed. After his monologue, he gets a call on his phone head, which then results in him fucking exploding and dying in front of us, permanently changing the trajectory of our life forever. Just kidding. Fuck that stupid phone. I don't care. What in the hell did he ever do for us? From here, you can also reclaim Deputy Duck, who got a little destroyed when we lost him during the Henry Hotline chase. Okay, so jokes aside, I do actually like this little scene. It's kinda cool and shows that Henry really isn't doing any of this of his own volition. He's clearly being held here by Frankie. However, I would in no way say this scene feels deserved, nor does the impact of it hit as hard as it could have if we had more time to learn Henry's story naturally through the gameplay. I really think this is a side effect of the game's very short runtime. There really isn't any time to make a character death like this feel meaningful, especially for a character we meet halfway through the entire game's runtime. The ideas were there, but I do think the execution is pretty lacking. This really doesn't affect my enjoyment of Finding Frankie that much though. I mainly like this game for its gameplay and art style. Obviously that's a pretty subjective take, so if the story being weak is a deal breaker for you, I 100% get that. The beauty of life is we can all have our own opinions, even if they're complete garbage. Anyway, back to this peak game, where we can finally make our way over to Frankie's Frosted Peak. This is literally just a Fall Guys obstacle course, pink slime and all. I would unironically argue this game takes more from Fall Guys than any Mascot horror game, which is kind of hilarious. You finish the Frosted Peak, make it over to a genuine death trap, and finally arrive at the entrance to the final part of the game show. Once this is beaten, The huge, massive $5 million cash prize is yours. Jumping into the entrance reveals that the finale is another Fall Guys riff, this time of the iconic finale game, Hexagon. Except this time, instead of other players trying to make you fall to your death, it's just Monster Frankie trying to murder you. The whole falling to your death thing is still in play here though, that's probably important to mention. 1, stop messing up my fucking game show later, and the final challenge is complete, making us the winner of Frankie's Parkour Palace. Except, the tile we were standing on falls, and so do we. As both you and Monster Frankie fall to your death, it gives the player of the game a little bit of time to reflect on the story that just unfolded. Everything that happened, including winning the entire game show, all just led up to the player character dying anyway. Truly a bittersweet ending. The game cuts to the credits before quickly transitioning back to the real Frankie watching this all unfold from the TV broadcast room. Suddenly, like a phoenix rising from the ash, you, the player character, slowly walk up to the broadcast room as an explosion goes off in front of you. It's time to make some fucking money. Out of any part of the game so far, this is the part that actually makes no sense. You can clearly see from the previous cutscene that there is literally nothing for the player character to grab onto or land on. I genuinely just have to assume this is some Undertale shit, and the player character has canonical save points and respawns, and that every time you die in the game, you don't actually die. There's actually a little more to this admittedly batshit theory that I can get into after the game finishes, so put a pin in that as we quickly go and get the money. The game cuts to a dark room with a massive door. Said door opens up and reveals a huge, beautiful room with the $5 million suspended in the air, packed up in a glass ball. Frankie admits defeat and explains that normally people only last a few seconds or maybe even a few minutes in the Parkour Palace, and that's if they're lucky. It's revealed that the ratings are through the roof because of your victory, and that this whole ordeal actually saved the show from being cancelled and the company from going bankrupt. Frankie then explains that the relationship between us is mutually beneficial, showing us a vision of what he describes as where you live. This vision is a nonsensical house or apartment environment with floating chairs and everything in a state of ruin. This weird vision of where you live, mixed with the implication that nobody has ever won this game show before, adds to my weird canonical respawns theory. Why would this be where you live if we were just a normal human being? It would make no sense unless Frankie is somehow lying to us, which would also make no sense because it's not like the player character would just suddenly forget they live in a normal house or apartment. And the fact that nobody else has probably ever beaten this parkour course before you leads me to believe that it's actually impossible. Even if you were to beat the game without dying a single time, there's always going to be that scripted death at the very end of the game that you can't avoid. No matter what you do, the game shows you in a near-death position before cutting to you being completely fine only seconds later. There is definitely something weird going on here, and I do wish the game explored it a little more. Maybe that's better saved for a sequel though. Who knows? The game ends with Frankie essentially inviting the player character to return for future seasons of the show now that it's no longer cancelled, thus repeating the cycle over and over again. And because everyone wears costumes, nobody's gonna know who's who every time they start a new season, meaning you can just pretend a new person wins every time and increase the ratings. It's kinda genius. With that, for real this time, the credits of Finding Frankie roll. And by roll, I mean spin, because the credits are actually an interactive gameplay section, which is super cute. The end. Overall, the pieces of the story on display in Finding Frankie are super interesting, but almost all of them suffer from the lack of time they are given to develop. If the game was longer and the story was more fleshed out, I really don't think I'd have any issues with it. I love the concept of the ending a lot, especially the whole repeating the cycle thing, but it just doesn't feel as meaningful or deserved given the lackluster buildup. I would definitely say that the story is pretty easily the weakest aspect of Finding Frankie, and that literally just comes down to it being way too ambitious for the short runtime. Everything else we're about to talk about is some peak Mascot horror gaming, for the most part. Without further delay, hop in your car, drive to Walmart, buy a second seatbelt, and strap in again. Because it's time to talk about the gameplay. And probably some other stuff too. But mostly the gameplay. Here we go. A theme you'll notice with Finding Frankie and its gameplay as I go through each of the segments here is that there's always a strong idea at play, but never enough time to truly build upon it. Like I said, it's the almost perfect Mascot horror game for a reason. A perfect example of this is actually the main parkour gameplay sections. Each one featured in Finding Frankie is good, great even, but 2 of them are ridiculously short, and that right there is already 2/3 of the parkour course's featured in the game. Yup, there's only 3. Sure, there are other parts of the game that use the parkour abilities given to you, and said parts might even have certain assets or elements also seen in the parkour courses, but they're still not straight up parkour courses. This isn't even really a bad thing on paper, because having gameplay variety that uses the character movement effectively helps prevent the game from getting stale. However, Finding Frankie is so damn short as is that the game could have absolutely benefited from having maybe 3 more linear parkour courses scattered around the map. Technically, there is a 4th course in the game, but it's just the tutorial room and is entirely optional. Still, it does a good job at teaching the player the very simple but fun parkour movement. I think the big issue here that really prevented more parkour courses from being in the game is the utilidors. This is the part of the game where things open up way more and the super linear structure the game had previously is loosened up a bit. This pretty much kills any hope of easily slotting in new, mandatory parkour courses, and it's no surprise that the next and final parkour course happens directly after the player is completely finished with the utilidors. I think the easiest solution to this problem probably would have been to add a few lead-up rooms before the trampoline park and the water park. So instead of just getting on the elevator and immediately going there, you'd have to do a quick parkour course first and maybe walk through a random room beforehand. This would create that missing linearity and give the game a perfect opportunity to slot in more gameplay to not only make Finding Frankie more fun, but also beef up the runtime in a much needed way. These hypothetical new courses don't even need to be made up of new assets or anything. The movement is fun enough that I literally wouldn't even mind just having more space to parkour around, regardless of visual flair or anything like that. Since we're talking about the main parkour gameplay, I should probably talk about the controls as well, since they are pretty much the main appeal of the game. Well, that and the parkour stuff, but they obviously go hand in hand. Finding Frankie features the basic controls you'd expect in a parkour game like this. I'm just gonna assume the closest game to this controls-wise is probably Mirror's Edge, although probably a much more watered-down version of it. You have your sprint, jump, mantle, basic shit. The interesting parts of the kit are the slide, the swing, and the wall jump. The slide is genuinely batshit insane. You seriously gain an insane amount of momentum in the blink of an eye. I can see this being seen as clunky to some people, which is fair, but I fucking love this slide so much, and I think it was intentionally designed this way with speedrunners in mind. It lets you zip around the map super fast, and skip some sections of parkour if you're good enough at timing jumps after a slide. It makes replaying the game, even as someone who isn't a speedrunner, such a blast. If you needed any real proof that the slide was probably intentionally designed like this, the first ever update for Finding Frankie was literally a speedrun update that encouraged speedrunners to play the game more. They definitely knew what they were doing, and it's a blast to use. Unfortunately, the swing and wall jump can't be used whenever you want, which I do understand from a I don't want people to accidentally break this game perspective, but it would also have been fun, man. The swing can only be activated with various bars scattered around both the environments and the parkour courses. It works, but it does feel a little clunky sometimes, and it's hard to read what you're doing when you're mid-swing. You don't really have any real indication that you're actually swinging other than, I guess I'm moving back and forth now, and it looks a little awkward. Maybe if the bars lit up when you grab them, or if there was more of an animation to the player's model to sell the swing better, this would be less of an issue. As it stands though, you barely use the swing in Finding Frankie anyway, so it's not really a deal breaker or anything. Finally, the wall jump is activated by these black trampoline panels that are located in various sections of the game. They're fun to bounce off of in quick succession, but the game never really does anything super cool with them. It's usually just pretty standard stuff. Oh yeah, you can also rail grind like Sonic the Hedgehog, but it's a fully automated process and just latches you to the rail as soon as you touch it. It's a little jarring how fast it is, but it's funny, so I don't care, sue me. That's pretty much it for the moveset. I think it's pretty freaking good. It's probably weaker than whatever its competition is in terms of smoothness, but I don't really think that it's jank, and everything controls fairly well. So, the moveset is good. My issue now turns back to the sheer lack of shit to do with said moveset in terms of straight up parkour gameplay. The first course after the tutorial is very simple as you might expect. The second one is way more fun with these little stupid ducks everywhere and some more interesting parkour setups, but it's still way too short. I don't know where else to bring this up here, so I should also probably mention that if you fall off these 2 specific parkour courses and hit the red tile floor panels, Frankie will spawn into the map and try to kill you. This would probably be more noteworthy if there were more instances of it being in the game, and if it wasn't super easy to avoid happening once you know the danger is there. Something I didn't know about this mechanic, even though the game literally tells you, is that if you're able to hide from Frankie, he'll fuck off and you won't get jump scared. I don't have footage of this because I never did it, but it's cool that it's in the game. The final parkour course, Frankie's Frosted Peak, is easily the best one and serves as an amazing build up to the final boss fight. For one, it's actually kinda long, which is a welcome change. But also, the stakes are way higher here, and it makes moving up the mountain a huge rush. As you move up the mountain, pink slime will also slowly rise as well, so you have to make your way up the parkour course while making sure you're both efficient and fast. Mess up on a section for too long or move too slow, and it's game over. This then directly transitions into that evil death trap mini parkour segment I mentioned during the story section, which I count as an extension of the Frosted Peak. The peak is fun, cheery, and colorful, and that immediately gets contrasted with the darker lighting and hundreds of saw blades ready to kill you. I understand 100% why all the parkour courses in this game can't be this grandiose. It would take away some of the awe factor that the Frosted Peak needs in order for the build up to the final boss to feel special. However, if all the parkour courses in the game were even 75% as long as Frosted Peak, that would at least be something. If the devs want to add some serious bang for your buck content to Finding Frankie, a build your own parkour course feature would instantly make the admittedly high price tag 100% worth it. At that point, the game would have significantly more parkour content than Mascot horror content, but like, who cares, man? I just want to beat more courses with these fun-ass controls. It's definitely a good thing that I'm mad at the lack of content rather than the content that's already there. You've got me wanting more. Anyway, just because that's all the strictly parkour content Finding Frankie has to offer, that doesn't mean that it isn't implemented into pretty much every single other aspect of the gameplay. I have dubbed these parts of the game the variety sections, and they're pretty much just every main gameplay section that isn't a standard parkour course or chase sequence. I mentioned at the very start of the video that Finding Frankie has puzzle-adjacent aspects in it, and when I said that, I was specifically thinking of these electrical circuit sections that the game makes you do a lot of. This is absolutely the closest Finding Frankie gets to having puzzles, but these sections are really more about optimal movement and being fast. Sure, sometimes they can be head scratchers, but overall, they're really just simple fun to break up the gameplay, and it definitely works. I should probably explain how these electrical circuit things even work. Basically, you'll often get in a spot on the map where there are no unlocked doors and no ways forward. You're trapped in a room with no way to keep making progress. But if you find yourself in this situation, there's always going to be a circuit breaker box hanging around. Once you find a circuit breaker box, you can interact with it simply by clicking on it. This will immediately start a timer, and you have to find and click on all the other circuit breakers in the room before the time runs out. It's essentially a super fast-paced, more movement-focused version of something like the drone button puzzles from Ban, and I fuck with them a lot. The added tension of the time limit really adds to the whole thing as well, even if they are fairly generous. So, the concept is simple. Just click on the boxes in time. But it's the execution of these sections that really make these parts of Finding Frankie really fun to play. The location of the circuit breaker boxes will often be in places you can't get to unless you do some parkour first, forcing you to truly lock in and find where these mini parkour sections are and how to do them. Sometimes you have to bounce across a room to the other side with a wall trampoline pad to reach a box, and other times you have to jump on top of vents and swing across pipes to reach another box. The circuit locations get trickier and the parkour gets more involved the further into the game you get, which I think gives these sections of gameplay a really nice difficulty curve. The circuit breaker gameplay all culminates in one massive section dedicated to it late in the game, the water park. The water park is pretty much just one big glorified circuit breaker section where you need to figure out both the locations of the breakers on the massive water slide thingy and figure out the best route to hit all the breakers within the time limit. It's definitely the most you'll have to think for any of these breaker sections, and I think it's a pretty fun piece of trial and error gameplay. After that circuit is completed, there's a few other breakers you have to hit on top of the ceiling using fans, and it's all brought to a close with a small bit of parkour right at the end to finish off the water park. So yeah, these breaker sections are very good overall, and serve as some genuinely fun gameplay to break up the other more fast-paced stuff Finding Frankie usually features. Speaking of fast-paced, this next bit of gameplay I want to talk about is the complete opposite of that. And unfortunately, it's also probably the worst part of Finding Frankie as a whole. You remember our good friend Henry Hotline, don't you? Great guy. His head fucking exploded. But before that little whoopsie happens in the story, Henry has his very own little gameplay section, and I think it breaks up the usual gameplay in a very awkward way. It's definitely the most traditional mascot horror part of the game, and it being a low point should probably say something. Okay, so the gist of this part of the game is you need to ring a bunch of toy phones in this dark, maze-like room while avoiding getting caught by Henry. At this point in the game, you have Deputy Duck on you as a tool you can use. Deputy Duck has both a flash, which is insanely useless, and a radar scan feature, which will show you the locations of all the phones through the walls of the room. So you kind of just awkwardly run around the room trying to reach all the phones without getting caught, but the room is so fucking dark that sometimes it almost feels impossible to figure out which direction Henry is coming from. It's also surprisingly easy to literally just run into him without even noticing, which is always fun. The silver lining to all of this is that you have a safe room you can run to if you need to wait Henry out a bit. So pretty much, the gameplay boils down to ringing the phones, running to the hiding spot, then doing it again. It's just not very engaging at all, and doesn't fit that well in a game like this. This is the only section of Finding Frankie that is anything like this, and it was definitely a good call. Surprisingly, I don't want to play a weird, slow, clunky, run from monster and maze section in a parkour game. You have this great moveset that can be used for so many other cool gameplay ideas that could also be more dark and scary like this one without slowing the game down to a halt. When it comes to Deputy Duck as a mechanic, he's pretty much only useful during this one section and nothing else. In theory, I guess that'd be fine, since you lose him directly after finishing the Henry Hotline stuff, but then you get him back near the end of the game for seemingly no reason. There's literally no other gameplay based around his mechanics after you reclaim him. He just feels pointless. You're probably wondering about the shitty flash that Deputy Duck can do that I mentioned earlier. Well, there is only one part of the game that genuinely expects you to use this. And all it is a dark vent that you have to flash in order to find a lever to open a door. A lever that, I might add, is pretty obviously there without the flash and can be pulled without using Deputy Duck at all. So the game wants you to use Deputy Duck for a grand total of 3 times, one being to open a single set of doors using the radar section for some reason. That's also kind of weird, that never comes back. We are entering Moozy gun levels of pointless territory. I just don't understand why this was added, I'm gonna be 100%. I guarantee you nobody would be complaining if this Henry Hotline section was replaced with something that actually used the game's controls to its advantage, and if Deputy Duck was changed from a weird flashlight to something that can help you with parkour. Fucking turn him into the grappler from Fortnite or something, I don't know. I just think that any sort of extra mechanics or tools in Finding Frankie should serve to enhance the already established gameplay blueprint. Alright, we're done. That's pretty much my only large issue with this game, and it's something I hope gets worked on if there's ever a sequel or something. Now for something much more entertaining. Fucking noobs. The trampoline park you have to go to near the end of the game makes you do this very fun minigame where you have to jump through a bunch of rings and kill these little fuckers called noobs. The jumping through rings thing is self-explanatory, but the noobs probably need some explanation. The noobs run around the trampoline park when they spawn in, and you have to chase after them. In order to kill them to make progress, you simply click on them. Once you successfully click one, they scream really loud and explode into a splatter of blood. There really isn't any horror in this section, it's pretty much just for fun, which I do appreciate. I think the trampoline park does a decent job at putting you in an environment where you can kind of just have fun and fuck around with the controls for a little bit. The trampolines scattered around everywhere also work as a decent obstacle to avoid while you're trying to do all of this, and I think it works very well. There's one more little gameplay section I want to talk about quickly before we move on here, and that's Frankie's Crash Course. This takes place right before you make it to the utilidors, and is pretty much that one minigame in Fall Guys where obstacles slide towards you, and you need to dodge them in order to not fall off a small platform. Except now, instead of just falling into a pit of nothingness, failure to dodge the obstacles here leads to getting murdered by a million saw blades located directly behind you, so that's cool. You only need to survive a little under 2 minutes on this, and it gets faster and faster the closer it is to being over. Very short section, but I like it a lot, it's neat. That's pretty much it for all the variety gameplay stuff in Finding Frankie, except for the chase sequences. Now, the chase sequences in this game are very good. Some of the best in the genre easily. This shouldn't be much of a surprise though. I mean, the game is literally focused around having fun parkour controls. It already has the edge on a lot of the other Mascot horror chases right away. But even just ignoring that, these 2 chases in Finding Frankie are just plain fun, and a little spooky as well. The first chase is near the beginning of the game, almost directly after the first parkour course. So at this point in the game, the player is already going to be pretty familiar with the controls. The chase starts by interacting with a breaker box on the wall, which then moves up and reveals Monster Frankie waiting right behind it. I think this kind of sudden start to the chase is really good, and definitely caught me off guard the first time I experienced it. From there, the real chase begins, which involves sliding down stair rails, sliding under obstacles, smashing through the right doors, making it across a spinning jungle gym thing that's suspended above a bottomless pit, bouncing off a wall into a fan, and finally, making it up a huge conveyor belt as logs roll down trying to push you off. Frankie himself also pulls a fast one on you at one point and surprises you by appearing in front of you mid-chase in a new empty hallway. If you slide right before this part, you'll probably end up sliding directly into his jumpscare hitbox, which is kind of funny. The actual structure of this chase is awesome, but what really elevates it for me is the use of the circuit breakers. That's right, they're back, and this time you need to complete the circuits super fast. Sometimes it'll just be 1 or 2 breakers you have to hit to open a door, which is still a little stressful, but obviously manageable, even in a high-intensity situation like this one. On the other side of the coin, though, Sometimes you have to hit 6 breakers in quick succession while Frankie is right on your ass, or you'll have to jump high up to hit a breaker to open a door. This is such a clever way to reuse a significantly more slow-paced gameplay mechanic compared to a chase in a significantly more fast-paced environment. It all comes together to create a phenomenal chase sequence that might be the best in the Mascot horror genre. The second chase with Henry Hotline is also pretty good, but it's definitely worse than the first one. I like that the vibe is a lot darker, but this chase has fewer interesting set pieces overall and has a weirdly large stretch of just running with very little movement, which is a shame. The music in Finding Frankie is pretty great, which is something I have yet to touch on. But the track for this specific chase is one of the best. It's simply just good chase music to start off with, but the inclusion of a bunch of ringing and other phone-related noises in the track makes it fit Henry's chase so much better. So yeah, I wish the second chase was a little better, and I wish there was maybe even a third one near the end of the game, but that first chase is so good that I can't even be mad here. Sometimes it's hard for games to make a seriously good first impression like that, but the first chase in Finding Frankie absolutely succeeds at doing that. Alright, we are almost done here. The only bit of gameplay left to talk about is the final boss battle. However, before we do that, I want to talk about something that isn't gameplay related at all. The art style, graphics, and character design. Let's do this fast. Frankie is a cool design, Henry is a cool design, although I don't really understand the design correlation between him and Frankie. It seems kinda random. Deputy Duck is funny, but he's also barely a design. The game looks nice, and I had no major frame rate issues or anything while I played it. All the environments fit the tone super well, and are fun to look at when they're meant to be, and unsettling to look at when they're meant to be. Like I mentioned previously, the animation work is all top notch. Probably the most impressive aspect of Finding Frankie, especially considering it's the team's first game. All of the jump scares are pre-rendered, which leads to the locations they take place in being sometimes a little weird, but overall, I think it was a smart choice. They look better this way, and have no possibility of glitching out or clipping into the environment. The 2D art and animation is also rock solid, and overall, the presentation just makes Finding Frankie feel very nice to play. It feels so premium for such a small budget indie game. Okay, that's pretty much it. Boss fight time. The final boss area, Hexa Havoc, is literally just Hexagon from Fall Guys like I mentioned earlier. The goal here is to survive until the timer at the top of the screen is finished counting down. Once the timer is finished, you have to pull a lever on the bottom layer of hexagons to end the boss fight and beat the game. While you're surviving, both Monster Frankie and the Noob Noobs will try to mess you up. The Noob Noobs explode shortly after they land from out of the sky, and Frankie chases you around the arena and will jump scare you if you hit his hitbox. There are 4 layers of hexagons to survive on, and the goal is pretty much just to survive on the top layers as much as possible so you can easily hit the lever on the bottom layer to end the fight. I like this section a lot, and I think the presentation is really cool with the more orangey lighting and crazy dubstep music blaring in the background. I do kind of wish this section had more elements to test the player's knowledge on the movement mechanics, since I think great final bosses should always make sure the player is using everything they learned from the game up until that point. But it's hard to be upset by a final boss as entertaining and creative as this one. And with that, I've officially run out of things to say about Finding Frankie. Let's finish this. Like I said way earlier in the video, the perfect Mascot horror game is a pretty subjective topic. Every person is going into these games looking to get slightly different experiences out of them, and I think that's what makes discussions like this one interesting. While there are a ton of small issues with Finding Frankie that absolutely bring the game down for me, the core of the experience is so genius and clicks with me so hard that I genuinely think it's the closest Mascot horror game I've played to fitting my ideal perfect vision. And for that, the whole team behind the game should be damn proud. Even if this is the end of the road for Finding Frankie, and we never get a sequel or any substantial content updates, I hope the team sticks together and goes on to create other great, hopefully longer, games. I've been yeah, and I'll see you all next time.